In a world addicted to comfort and excuses, one man redefined what it means to suffer with purpose. Before we dive into the brutal truths and unfiltered lessons of Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, prepare yourself. This isn't just a review, this is a wake-up call. Now, here's Grayson Allen with the full narration. The Savage Gospel, Why David Goggins Can't Hurt Me is either your wake-up call or your worst nightmare. Imagine a man who transformed himself from a 300-pound exterminator spraying for cockroaches to completing over 60 ultramarathons, 3 Hell Weeks, and becoming the only person to complete Navy SEAL training, Army Ranger School, and Air Force Tactical Air Controller training. Now imagine that same man telling you that your biggest enemy isn't the world, it's you. Welcome to the brutal honesty of David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me, the anti-guru who became a guru. In a self-help landscape cluttered with motivational speakers promising easy transformations, David Goggins emerges like a sledgehammer through a meditation retreat. This isn't your typical inspirational memoir filled with gentle encouragement and positive affirmations. This is a 364-page assault on everything comfortable about personal development, a book that reads less like guidance and more like a declaration of war against mediocrity. Goggins doesn't want to hold your hand through transformation. He wants to grab you by the throat and drag you kicking and screaming toward your potential. The subtitle, Master Your Mind and Defy the Odds, isn't a promise. It's a challenge thrown down like a gauntlet, daring you to prove you're not as soft as he suspects you are. But here's what makes this book genuinely dangerous. Goggins has earned the right to be this harsh. This isn't some trust fund motivational speaker pontificating from privilege. This is a man who clawed his way out of an abusive childhood, conquered learning disabilities, overcame racism, battled obesity, and then decided that surviving wasn't enough. He needed to become uncommon among the uncommon. The Archaeology of Pain. What separates Can't Hurt Me from other memoirs isn't just the extremity of Goggins' achievements. It's his unflinching excavation of the psychological architecture that enabled those achievements. He doesn't just tell you what he did. He performs a brutal autopsy on why he was able to do it when others couldn't. But this isn't trauma porn designed to elicit sympathy. Goggins uses his pain as raw material, not for excuses, but for excavation. He identifies what he calls his accountability mirror, the practice of confronting yourself with complete honesty about who you are versus who you claim to be. It's a concept so simple it seems almost stupid, yet so psychologically demanding that most people will never attempt it seriously. The 40% rule and the mythology of limits. The book's most famous concept, the 40% rule, emerges not as abstract philosophy, but as hard-earned wisdom from the crucible of extreme physical and mental testing. Goggins argues that when your mind tells you you're done, you're only 40% done. The remaining 60% can only be accessed by pushing through the wall your brain is constructed to protect you from discomfort. This isn't motivational fluff. Goggins backs this up with scientific research about the brain's protective mechanisms and then demonstrates its practical application through achievements that seem to defy human physiology. Running 100-mile races on broken feet, completing Navy SEAL Hell Week 3 times, doing 4,030 pull-ups in 17 hours to break a world record. But the 40% rule isn't really about physical achievement. It's about cognitive reconstruction. Goggins argues that we live in a society that has systematically weakened our tolerance for discomfort, creating generations of people who tap out at the first sign of real difficulty. The rule isn't just about finding extra reserves, it's about reprogramming your relationship with suffering itself. The cookie jar method. Weaponizing your past. Perhaps the book's most practically useful concept is what Goggins calls the cookie jar, a mental repository of past achievements and overcome obstacles that you can draw from during moments of crisis. It's not about positive thinking or visualization. It's about building an evidence-based case for your own resilience. Goggins describes reaching into his cookie jar during ultramarathons, pulling out memories of surviving his father's violence, overcoming learning disabilities, or completing previous impossible challenges. Each memory becomes proof that he survived worse, done harder things, overcome bigger obstacles. It's a technique that transforms past suffering from a source of limitation into a weapon for future battles. This concept alone justifies the book's existence. Unlike most self-help advice that requires you to believe in abstract possibilities, the cookie jar method builds on concrete evidence of your own capacity. It doesn't require faith, it requires memory and the willingness to learn from your own history of overcoming the challenges, where philosophy meets practice. What makes Can't Hurt Me more than just an extreme memoir is its integration of challenges throughout the narrative. After each chapter, Goggins presents specific exercises designed to push readers beyond their comfort zones. These aren't gentle suggestions, they're deliberate provocations. Take the challenge to write down all your insecurities and failures, then read them aloud in front of a mirror. Or the instruction to attempt something physical that scares you, document the experience, and analyze your mental dialogue during moments of wanting to quit. These challenges transform the book from passive consumption into active confrontation with your own limitations. The genius of this approach is how it implicates the reader in their own transformation. You can't just intellectually appreciate Goggins' achievements. You have to test your own capacity for discomfort and growth. The challenges force you to discover whether you're someone who talks about change or someone who actually does the work of changing. The uncomfortable truths about motivation. One of the book's most valuable contributions is its demolition of common myths about motivation and mental toughness. Goggins doesn't present himself as naturally gifted or inherently tough. Instead, he reveals himself as someone who was spectacularly weak and then engineered his own reconstruction through systematic exposure to difficulty. This is crucial because it makes his achievements both more impressive and more accessible. He wasn't born tough. He became tough through deliberate practice with suffering. He didn't discover hidden reserves of motivation. He built those reserves through repeated exposure to situations that demanded more than he thought he could give. The book's treatment of motivation is particularly sophisticated. Goggins argues that motivation is unreliable, a fair-weather friend that abandons you precisely when you need it most. Instead, he advocates for what he calls callousing the mind, building mental resilience through progressive exposure to discomfort, just as physical calluses develop through repeated friction. This reframes personal development from seeking inspiration to building systems. It's not about feeling motivated. It's about developing the capacity to perform, regardless of how you feel. It's a profoundly adult approach to change that acknowledges the gap between intention and execution. The shadow side of extremism. Can't Hurt Me demands honest engagement with its potential dangers. Goggins' approach to self-improvement is undeniably extreme, and the book doesn't shy away from the costs of his methods. He describes injuries, relationship strain, and the isolation that comes with pursuing goals that most people consider insane. This isn't a book for everyone, and Goggins seems almost proud of that fact. His methods require a level of physical and psychological risk that many people cannot or should not attempt. The book serves as both inspiration and warning, proof of human potential and evidence of what that potential might cost. But the extremism serves a rhetorical purpose beyond just documenting Goggins' personal journey. By pushing human capacity to its apparent limits, he reveals how much unused potential exists in normal circumstances. His ultramarathons aren't prescriptions for everyone to become endurance athletes. They're demonstrations of how much more we're all capable of than we typically attempt. The philosophy of suffering. What elevates Can't Hurt Me above typical achievement memoirs is its sophisticated philosophy of suffering. Goggins doesn't just endure pain, he develops a complex relationship with it that borders on the spiritual. He argues that voluntary suffering, deliberately chosen and progressively increased, is the pathway to discovering who you really are beneath your comfortable assumptions about yourself. This isn't masochism, it's methodology. Goggins uses physical and mental challenges as diagnostic tools, revealing character flaws, mental weaknesses, and limiting beliefs that remain hidden during normal life. The suffering strips away pretense and forces confrontation with unvarnished truth about your capabilities and character. The book suggests that our culture's obsession with comfort and convenience has created a generation of people who have never truly tested themselves, who live their entire lives without knowing what they're actually capable of achieving or enduring. The voluntary suffering Goggins advocates isn't about punishment. It's about discovery. The accountability mirror revolution. The concept of the accountability mirror, standing naked in front of a mirror and confronting the gap between who you are and who you claim to be, represents the book's most psychologically demanding challenge. It's a practice that strips away the comfortable narratives we tell ourselves about our progress, our efforts, and our limitations. Goggins describes using the accountability mirror to force himself to acknowledge uncomfortable truths, that he was making excuses, that he wasn't working as hard as he claimed, that his failures were choices rather than circumstances. It's a practice that transforms self-awareness from abstract concept into brutal daily reckoning. This isn't therapy or gentle self-reflection. It's a systematic assault on self-deception. The mirror doesn't lie, and Goggins uses it as a tool for maintaining absolute honesty about his performance, his effort, and his results. It's a practice that many readers will find too psychologically demanding to maintain, which may be exactly the point. The uncommon among the uncommon. Goggins introduces the concept of becoming uncommon among the uncommon. Not just achieving success, but achieving success in environments where success itself is rare. Navy SEALs, ultramarathoners, elite military units. These communities represent the top 1% of the 1%, and Goggins argues that the principles that separate the uncommon from the common can be applied to any field or challenge. The uncommon among the uncommon don't just work hard. They work hard when working hard becomes unbearable. They don't just have goals. They pursue goals that most people consider impossible. They don't just overcome obstacles. They seek out obstacles as opportunities to develop capabilities that others avoid developing. This isn't about being better than other people. It's about being better than the person you were yesterday, and better than the person you thought you could become. It's about discovering that your limitations are often assumptions rather than facts, and that those assumptions can be systematically dismantled through deliberate practice with difficulty. The war against comfortable. Perhaps the book's most important insight is its identification of comfort as the enemy of growth. Goggins argues that our natural tendency to seek ease and avoid discomfort is precisely what keeps us trapped in mediocrity. The path to exceptional achievement requires declaring war on your own comfort zone and maintaining that war as a lifestyle rather than a temporary campaign. This creates a fundamental tension with most approaches to happiness and well-being, which emphasize balance, self-care, and sustainable practices. Goggins advocates for something closer to controlled extremism, deliberately choosing the harder path, not because it's inherently better, but because it develops capacities that can't be developed any other way. The book doesn't resolve this tension, and perhaps that's appropriate. Goggins isn't claiming his approach is right for everyone, but he is claiming that most people have never seriously tested the alternative to comfortable living. His life becomes a case study in what becomes possible when comfort stops being the primary decision-making criterion. The science of mental toughness. While Can't Hurt Me is primarily a memoir, Goggins integrates substantial research about the neuroscience of mental toughness, the psychology of performance under stress, and the physiology of endurance. He doesn't just claim that mental barriers are arbitrary. He provides scientific evidence for the brain's role in creating and maintaining those barriers. The research adds credibility to claims that might otherwise seem like motivational hyperbole. When Goggins argues that most people quit far before they reach their actual limits, he backs it up with studies about the brain's protective mechanisms and the gap between perceived capacity and actual capacity. This scientific grounding makes the book's more extreme claims seem less like outlier experiences and more like systematic applications of established principles. Goggins isn't a genetic freak or psychological anomaly. He's someone who has learned to manipulate normal human psychology in service of abnormal human achievement. The leadership paradox. One of the book's most interesting contradictions is how Goggins' intensely individual approach to achievement translates into leadership and influence. His methods seem almost antisocial: long hours of solitary training, deliberate isolation from comfort and convenience, practices that create distance between himself and normal human experience. Yet the book itself has become a phenomenon precisely because it speaks to something universal: the sense that we're capable of more than we're currently achieving, and the frustration with approaches to personal development that feel too gentle to create genuine transformation. Goggins' Extremism gives permission to others to push harder than they previously thought appropriate. The paradox is that his relentless focus on individual transformation has created a message that resonates with millions of people. His refusal to soften his approach or make his methods more palatable has somehow made them more influential than gentler alternatives. The mirror test for readers. Can't Hurt Me functions as its own accountability mirror for readers. It forces confrontation with uncomfortable questions. Are you making excuses? Are you settling for less than you're capable of? Are you choosing comfort over growth? Have you ever really tested your limits? Or are you living within assumed boundaries that might not actually exist? The book's power lies in its ability to make readers question their own narratives about limitation, effort, and possibility. It doesn't provide easy answers or comfortable reassurances. Instead, it challenges readers to become scientists of their own potential, using discomfort as a laboratory for discovering what they're actually capable of achieving. This makes it a genuinely dangerous book, not because it promotes reckless behavior, but because it promotes reckless honesty about the gap between your current performance and your actual capacity. It's a book that ruins comfortable excuses and makes mediocrity feel like a choice rather than a circumstance. The long-term experiment. Perhaps the book's most profound contribution is its reframing of life itself as a long-term experiment in human potential. Goggins doesn't present his achievements as endpoints, but as data points in an ongoing investigation into what's possible for someone who refuses to accept conventional limitations. This experimental mindset transforms failure from something to be avoided into something to be studied. When Goggins fails at challenges, and he documents several spectacular failures, he treats them as information rather than indictments. The failures become part of the dataset for understanding the boundaries of human performance and the methods for expanding those boundaries. This approach makes the book's more extreme elements feel less like prescriptions and more like provocations. Goggins isn't telling everyone to become ultra-marathoners. He's demonstrating what becomes possible when someone decides to treat their life as a laboratory for testing the outer limits of human potential. The ultimate accountability. Can't Hurt Me succeeds because it does something most self-help books avoid. It holds readers accountable, not just for implementing its advice, but for honestly assessing whether they're the kind of person who will implement its advice. The book doesn't promise that everyone can achieve what Goggins has achieved, but it does suggest that most people never seriously attempt to discover what they might be capable of achieving. The challenges embedded throughout the book serve as diagnostic tests, revealing whether readers are genuinely committed to change or just intellectually interested in the idea of change. The book sorts its audience into those who will do the work and those who will just admire the work from a safe distance. This accountability extends beyond the book's pages. Once you've read Goggins' story and absorbed his methods, it becomes harder to make comfortable excuses about your own limitations. The book plants a voice in your head that asks uncomfortable questions during moments of potential surrender. Are you really at your limit, or are you just at your comfort limit? The verdict. Transformation or intimidation. Can't Hurt Me is ultimately a book about the price of becoming exceptional and whether you're willing to pay that price. It's not a gentle guide to self-improvement. It's a brutal assessment of the gap between who you are and who you could become if you were willing to endure the discomfort required for genuine transformation. The book succeeds spectacularly at what it attempts, providing proof of concept for human potential while offering specific methods for accessing that potential. It fails spectacularly at what most self-help books attempt, making change feel easy, comfortable, or guaranteed. This failure is actually its greatest strength. By refusing to soften his message or make his methods more palatable, Goggins has created something more valuable than another comfortable lie about personal development. He's created an uncomfortable truth about what transformation actually requires, the willingness to systematically destroy the comfortable assumptions that keep you trapped in mediocrity. The question Can't Hurt Me forces every reader to answer isn't whether Goggins' specific achievements are worth pursuing. It's whether you're willing to discover what you're actually capable of achieving when comfort stops being your primary decision-making criterion. In the end, the book's title isn't just a statement about Goggins' relationship with suffering. It's a challenge to readers about their own relationship with discomfort, difficulty, and the vast unexplored territory that lies beyond their current conception of what's possible. The revolution begins when you stop asking whether you can do something and start asking whether you're willing to find out. Thank you for watching. If Goggins' story made you uncomfortable, that means it hit the mark. Keep pushing, keep questioning, and above all, don't settle. This is Grayson Allen. Until next time, face the mirror and don't flinch.